This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to the link in the description below so they know that I sent you. Hello everyone, I'm SIPHONER. Today is Wednesday, which starting this week means it's time for an MTG Top 10. So far, MTG Top 10s have been once a week on Fridays, but now I'll be bringing you two a week. In these videos, I've looked at a lot of keyword abilities, but today we're doing one that I haven't gotten to yet, and that's Menace. In terms of flavor, Menace is meant to indicate that a creature is so frightening that a blocker can't stand its ground on its own. It needs a friend to feel confident about blocking. This ability primarily appears in black and red, and is the evasive ability that those two colors are given the most frequently these days. Menace was only given keyword ability status in 2015 with the release of Magic Origins, but it has actually been in the game since Fallen Empires in 1994, though it wasn't used with any regularity. Since 2015, it has also been an evergreen keyword ability, meaning that it appears in every set. In all, there are 130 cards in the game that either have Menace or grant Menace, and in this video, we're going to look at the 10 that have had the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score these lists. Pro Tour and Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Vintage and Legacy Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and Grand Prix top 8s are worth 1 point. Now, let's move to number 10. At number 10, we have Flameblade Adept. While, obviously, a 1-mana 1/2 with Menace isn't the scariest thing, the fact that this can raise its power to instant speed is what makes this so frightening. Because Menace creatures can only be blocked by 2 or more creatures, sometimes you can get a huge blowout on an opponent that decides to double block a creature like the Adept, who can potentially take down both creatures. Plus, it's just harder to block, and sometimes it can hit for a lot more than 1 damage. There weren't enough reasons to discard or cycle cards while Flameblade Adept was in Standard, and as a result it never really saw play there. However, it has found a home in Modern, alongside fellow discard payoff from Amonkhet, Hollow One. This deck plays a lot of cards that involve discarding cards, and the main plan is to power out a Hollow One as early as turn 1, but the deck can also get in some huge damage with a difficult-to-block Flameblade Adept, who raises his power a couple points every turn. So far, Hollow One has been its only home in Modern, and as long as that deck continues to be relevant, I think the Adept will continue to see play. And number 9 is Relentless Dead. Between having fairly efficient stats and a huge and relevant block of text, Relentless Dead was one of the reasons that mono-black zombies was actually a thing in Standard in 2017. It was difficult to block early thanks to Menace, and then even if you did block it and kill it, it could just come back to your opponent's hand and or bring a zombie back from their graveyard directly to the battlefield. While its time in the spotlight was restricted to only 2017 because there was only a brief window when Amonkhet and Shadows over Innistrad Zombies were all in Standard, it did put on an impressive show that year. At number 8, there's a Vampire with Menace and Insolent Neonate. If you play the Neonate on turn 1, it can get in for some evasive damage early, and then later in the game it can be cashed in to Rummage. It saw a bit of play in standard aggro decks as well as in God Pharaoh's Gift because it could help you load up the graveyard for creatures to eternalize. However, Modern is where it's had the most success. Dredge had a big resurgence in Modern in 2016 thanks to the printing of Cathartic Reunion and the unbanning of Golgari Grave Troll, and Insolent Neonate went along for the ride. Any card that can both help you discard and draw cards is great in Dredge because you can discard something with Dredge, and then use the Dredge effect to start milling yourself. The strategy around which all Dredge decks are built. While the Grave Troll was banned again in January of 2017, Insolent Neonate and Cathartic Reunion both turned out to be enough to keep Dredge decks alive in the format, and it seems likely the Neonate will add to its score in Dredge decks in the near future. At number 7, we have an artifact creature with Menace, and that's Noxious Gearhulk. The Gearhulk has a very powerful Enter the Battlefield trigger, letting you kill whatever you want, and even gaining you life off of it. This is especially powerful because it is attached to a creature with a respectable stats and Menace. Killing a creature actually synergizes well with Menace because, obviously enough, thinning out the opponent's board means they will have a much more difficult time blocking. The Gearhulk has only been played in Standard, where it picked up all of its points in various Golgari decks, with the Delirium deck being its most frequent home. It brought a bit of extra value to that deck too because the Delirium mechanic wants you to get cards with 4 different types in your graveyard, and as an artifact creature, the Gearhulk counted for half of that. At number 6, we have the second zombie to make the list in Lord of the Accursed, who is a zombie lord that also has the ability to grant all zombies Menace, which can be pretty scary if your board has a bunch of zombies on it. It saw play in the same mono-black zombie deck that Relentless Dead was played in, but it saw a bit wider play because its easier mana cost also meant that it wasn't difficult to fit it into black-white variants of the zombie deck in that standard format. At number 5, we have another creature with a powerful Enter the Battlefield ability and Menace, and that's Goblin Dark Dwellers. This ability lets you cast a cheap instant or sorcery for free from your graveyard, which will regularly be a nice removal spell, making the effect it has when it comes into play somewhat similar to Noxious Gearhulk. It'll give you a 2-for-1 in a lot of cases, and then can actually be a bit of a concern for your opponent thanks to the reasonable stats coupled with Menace. That kind of creature is a control player's dream, and that's mostly where these goblins saw play. Particularly in Grixis control, though near the end of its time in Standard, it saw play in more aggressive decks like Mardu vehicles. In 2017, the Dark Dwellers got its only Modern Grand Prix top 8 to date in a Blue Moon deck at Grand Prix San Antonio. I think it's possible the Dark Dwellers put up some more points in Modern going forward, just because it seems like such a great deal for 5 mana. At number 4, we have Rampaging FEROCIDON, a creature with Menace that had to get banned out of Standard. The FEROCIDON makes opposing players very worried about their life total. The total package of a 3-mana 3/3 with Menace that stops the opponent from gaining life and damages players every time one of their creatures enters the battlefield means that the FEROCIDON often had you on a deceptively quick clock, especially because the decks he was played in were incredibly fast to begin with and had lots of burn that could go to the face. From September 2017 until January 2018, when the card was banned, Red Deck Wins, particularly a variant called Ramunap Red, was the most dominant deck in Standard. This deck rapidly killed people, and the presence of the FEROCIDON made it so that the usual strategy against such a deck, gaining life, wasn't so easy. Both the FEROCIDON and Ramunap Ruins were banned in January of 2018, but in that short window, the FEROCIDON still managed to put up 17 points. If it hadn't been banned, it would be much higher on this list, maybe even in first place. I don't think it is completely out of the question that the FEROCIDON sees play in Modern going forward, so maybe it can move up the list someday. At number 3, we have a Planeswalker that makes tokens that have Menace, and that's VRASKA, Relic Seeker. 6 mana is a lot, and Planeswalkers that cost that much have to bring some serious power, and VRASKA doesn't disappoint there. She has a +2 that can protect her while also pressuring the opponent with creatures with Menace, and a -3 that allows her to kill a lot of things, and it even provides you a treasure token for a bit of fixing and ramp. So yeah, VRASKA can take over a game all on her own. In her time in Standard, she's seen play in 3 and 4 color energy decks, as well as Golgari and Sultai midrange. She is likely to continue to put up impressive numbers as long as she remains in Standard. At number 2, we have GLINT-SLEEVE SIPHONER. The Siphoner takes advantage of its Menace not only by doing damage to the opponent, but if it can attack, it gives you more energy, which means you get to draw cards with it. The great thing about it is that it only needs to attack and survive once to net you that card, and thanks to Menace, if you play this on turn 2, that's not going to be super difficult, and that puts you in line for a 2-for-1. Early on, in its time in Standard, it was played in energy-heavy decks that could run Attune with Ether and Rogue Refiner, but eventually both of those cards got banned. Also, as an aside, who would have thought a video about Menace would have so many references to bannings? Anyhow, yeah, Attune with Ether and Rogue Refiner got banned, and this was bad news for a lot of energy cards, but GLINT-SLEEVE Siphoner kept seeing play, mostly because it didn't need much help to be good. It was played in some decks without any other ways to make energy at all, and it was also played in Golgari Constrictor decks, which after the banning focused more on +1/+1 counters, but Golgari Constrictor could also add to players more energy counters, and that worked quite well with GLINT-SLEEVE Siphoner. And at number 1, we have KARI SKYSHIP Raider. Menace and First Strike is a nasty combination as it reduces the options your opponent has for effectively blocking, since First Strike can kill one of the blockers before combat, and now your creature survives. On top of that, KARI brings her monkey token pal along with her every time she attacks, and as a result she can do huge amounts of damage early, especially if you have removal to clear blockers out of the way. It began its time in Standard as part of the same Ramunap Red deck that Rampaging FEROCIDON was played in, and continued to see play in the post-banning version of the deck, which was then mostly just called Red Deck Wins. Near the end of her time in Standard, she also saw play in Rakdos Aggro. She had a great career in Standard, one that was productive enough that she sits firmly atop this list. Well, that does it for today's MTG Top 10. I will be back with another one on Friday. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to see MTG Top 10s from the past, you can see the playlist on your screen now. There's over 160 videos you can catch up on. Thanks for watching.